Yeah, do you ever watch like the ASMR videos on
Yeah,
like
and they're
TikTok?
like,
Yeah, and they're like, or like
yeah, I'm like, what the fuck is
that'll
going
just
on?
be that instead. We won't have any like legitimate conversation. It'll just be like, did you bring any of your lettuce or anything that we can just
No,
do? Like
crunching.
tearing lettuce would probably be a good one.
Yeah.
All right. All right, so I'm Hunter Latown, and I'm here today with Jake Midura. Jake is the owner of Good For You Gardens, a regenerative family farm based out of Bow, New Hampshire, as well as Manchester, New Hampshire. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. I'm Jake. I've been farming for probably about 5 years now, and I've just completely fallen in love with it. I started farming when I was back at Hippie's farm, and it was a wonderful experience. I mean, it taught me so many different things, not just about farming, but about mainly the world around me. And I loved it so much. I really connected with nature, and it made me kind of want to protect it and preserve it, and also help it become stronger and just more resilient. And I guess that's kind of what inspired me to start my own farm. And so me and my mom, we started leasing land in Bow, and it's been a journey ever since.
I think it's the coolest thing. So Jake and I went to high school together, and in high school, you always were like, "I'm going to be a farmer one day."
Yeah.
Like we were like, "Okay, Jake, I believe in you." So that's awesome that you like did what you said you were going to do, and quickly too. I mean, it's not hasn't weirdly enough. It's been like a long time since high school, but also
Yeah.
not that long, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I just kept following it. I don't know. It was just
Yeah.
like something inside of me that wanted to take care of plants, and I don't know. It just made me feel whole almost,
Yeah.
you know?
I remember at like your birthday party in middle school or something, and someone gave you like a raspberry plant. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And we're all like, "This is the coolest thing ever!" Like
know,
the
it's
raspberry plant. Do you still have that? Did it survive?
No,
Like
it's probably
10,
dead.
15 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, that's fair. Fair enough. So you're a regenerative farm. So
Yes.
what exactly does that like? Short answer, I guess. What does that mean?
Well, a regenerative farm is, I mean, think of the word, it's regenerate, right? So you're
Fair
taking like a piece of land that's been farmed for so long, or it's just been a forest and it was ripped down or something, and you're trying to regenerate the ecosystem that what was once there, you know? So it's like you're trying to build soil, you're trying to build biodiversity in the soil. So we compost a lot. We add a lot of amendments. We're adding fungus and earthworms and a bunch of different things to just kind of build this ecosystem inside of the soil.
And that's something most farms don't do that or not. You know, at what point can you like call yourself a regenerative farm?
Right. So a lot of large scale farms, they like to till their soil mainly for aesthetics and for fluffing up the soil. And it doesn't do any good to the soil. It actually kills all the microbes and everything living inside that soil. And a lot of it erodes. All the soil will just erode with rain, wind, and a bunch of other things. But they're not really giving life to the soil. They're not putting anything back into the soil. And that's one thing that I think farmers have. I mean, I can't say we've done it wrong because we didn't do it intentionally, right? But I think it's definitely something to look at. If you take so much from the soil and you never give anything back to it,
Yeah.
it's eventually going to be gone. So the only way to keep your farm sustainably growing food every year with healthy soil is to give back to the soil, to feed the soil, because it feeds us, you know,
Yeah.
and with plants and stuff. But you have to feed the soil, and I think that's the key.
And so is that it must be more labor intensive or less cost effective to do that, right? Or everyone would kind of
Right.
do it, right? So is there, I mean, I'm sure it's, you know, being like a smaller family farm versus like those huge ones out in the Midwest, but is there a big cost difference or big labor difference to do it that way?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing small scale farming. So we're just growing on these permanent raised beds, you know, and they're just a 50-foot row, and we don't till our fields, you know, so we're just adding more to each row every time that we flip it. Large scale farming is like a monoculture. So you're growing like a big patch of corn, and it's just one variety of corn, and then you till it right at the end of the season just to get rid of everything and kind of mix all that together. And it's not the best practice because you're growing one crop And if one disease comes in or one pest comes in or some storm takes it out, you're kind of putting all your eggs in one basket.
Okay.
And it's just not great for the soil because think of a forest, right? The forest is so diverse. It's got every living being in there known to man, right? And then we come in, we'll plant a giant field of corn, and all these organisms that are in the soil aren't benefiting from all that diversity. They only have one source of food from one plant. So it's not, it's like there's no survival of the fittest. There's no selection, there's no evolution in there. It's just one sort of man-made, I wouldn't even call it an ecosystem. It's just not promoting any sort of diversity.
Huh. So I know too, you'll see, what we have today for crops, like what corn typically looks like today versus what it looked like 100, 200 years ago. And it's completely unrecognizable.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of that is from like genetic engineering and modification, right? But I would imagine that a lot of that also comes from that there's no chance for it to stay the way it was or to change in like a natural progression, right? So you're just getting this like, I don't know, it sounds like an incestual way to grow your plants when it's like just the same after, every single time, right?
Right. It's crazy. There's a lot of benefits. I mean, it's hybridizing food. It's taking genes from one plant that did really good or it was super sweet or really big, and then breeding it with another plant that was resilient to a pest or a disease or something. And it's genius and it's brilliant. And I think, our food has gotten much better over time, but
Yeah, it sounds good on paper.
Yeah.
On paper, it sounds like a great idea, right? I feel like maybe it's gone too far.
right. I mean,
You know?
it's when we're breeding them to become resilient to glyphosate
Yes.
or,
Yes.
any type of pesticide or something like that. And then, we're eating that food that has that on it, and it's sad because that pesticide is killing all of the worms. It's killing all the bees. It's killing everything that the plant needs around it
Yeah.
to become its full, nutritious being.
Yeah.
And it's just we're stripping our food of what it needs to be the best it can.
Yeah. So do you guys use zero pesticides, I'm assuming, right? Do you have, what about natural pesticides? I think you mentioned yesterday, like bringing in like ladybugs.
Yeah.
Talk about that because I think that's super interesting. And I think,
Right.
I mean, I'd personally rather eat a bunch of chopped up ladybugs in my food than glyphosate. So
Honestly,
I had to pick.
It's so weird, but it's it's nature. It's using nature.
Yes.
And it's called IPM, so it's integrated pest management. So you're integrating a pest like a ladybug or a parasitistic wasp or anything really, even a praying mantis, and you're introducing that to your farm to get rid of a certain pest. And I'm not going to say get rid of because it won't get rid of it. It'll just balance it out. So ladybugs will eat aphids. Aphids are pests that suck the sap out of your plant, and they just completely annihilate a whole crop. And they'll stick around throughout the whole winter. I mean, they're detrimental to plant health. So we'll bring in ladybugs. They'll eat the aphids, and then they'll keep breeding and stay on the property because the aphids are still there. So you're trying to create a balance of like yin and yang, good and bad, because you want the bad pest around still to keep the ladybugs there. Because if you wipe out something entirely, the ladybugs will leave.
Yeah.
So
Do you have to do a lot of research or planning before you bring those in? Like, I'm
Yeah.
sure ladybugs are one thing, but make sure you're not like bringing in,
bad ones.
there's something that's going to harm that particular environment.
So that's the thing. You have to kind of look at what is native to your environment.
exactly.
I can't just bring in like a ball python and let it loose because I have mice, because look at Florida. Right. So it is. And it's also disease. There's a lot of pests or bugs you can buy on Amazon or something that could have a potential disease that would introduce that disease to the natural colony that's around you. And you don't want to do that. So you kind of have to look at, it's hard, but you got to look at their reviews, where the ladybugs are coming from, see if they have good reviews, if people noticed anything weird. Also, you want to buy locally. Going on Amazon might not be the best idea for buying a bug,
Ladybug,
right? Yeah. So, looking at just overall the rating of the company and where it comes from and how they do it, if they're really doing this morally and ethically in a good way, then you could trust it. but I wouldn't just go around buying bugs willy nilly, because it's not the greatest way to do it. But it definitely, you can see a difference. I mean, also, bringing in birds, building birdhouses so that they can naturally come in, building bat houses so you can have natural bats on your property. It's having beehives and growing bees so you can, have pollination throughout all of your farm. It's things that you can do physically that will bring in natural bugs too. It's crazy how we can kind of not manipulate nature, but use it in a way that benefits us.
Work with it.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Working with nature.
It's so interesting because if I had to list, things that I would think that you would tell me, insider scoop on the farming industry, sourcing ladybug suppliers, vetting ladybug suppliers and other bugs would not have been probably the top 100 things I would have guessed.
No.
I mean, it makes perfect sense though.
Yeah.
At your scale, are there many regulations involved with that, or is it more so, it's your ethical responsibility to make sure it's done right?
As a farmer, it's your ethical responsibility, and
Okay.
it's not really regulated that much, especially when you go on Amazon.
Yeah.
You can find anything on Amazon.
Yeah.
But it's it's cool, but you can do your own testing too. You can quarantine your bugs and keep them alive and keep breeding them to see if they do have any diseases. Wait to see if the colony collapses, or wait to see if they keep on breeding and keep creating a bigger colony. It's like my fish tanks. I have so many different fish tanks, and one fish I noticed had ick, so I took him out, started treating both of the tanks, and just kept it quarantined. The fish that had ick died, unfortunately, but it saved the rest of the fish tank from getting ick. It's quarantining things that might be an issue. Same thing on the farm. When a plant has a disease, I take that diseased plant and I'll throw it in the fire. You can't just compost it because it could spread in the wind or whatever if it's a fungus or something. But it's identifying an issue and acting on it quickly.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back exactly to what you said earlier with the huge farms and all the corn, right? And if one thing happens, then it's going to likely on some level, I'd imagine, spread to the rest of the field.
Right.
If you're not taking the careful steps to, I feel like we as a society, we've just moved so far away from having like an actual relationship with our food.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the way it's grown. And I wouldn't expect everybody to have their own garden and grow, and even a portion of their food, but there is such a disconnect. And I think that matters. And I feel like people are starting to realize that more.
Right.
But what do we do about that? You
Right.
know?
I mean, education, it's, I don't know, becoming more aware. Also going to farmers markets, meeting the people that are growing the food. That's really cool because then you create a relationship. You want to help that person. They want to help you, It's relationships. It's honestly the thing that keeps us going. I don't know. It's nice too to be a farmer and barter with people. It's like you're going back in time.
System.
Yeah. Like I'll give you some lettuce if you give me some honey from your hive, or there's so many different ways to trade and do things, and it just builds your relationship.
Very true. I think that, the problem with that, of course, is how do we do that at a bigger scale?
Right.
How do we make that more accessible to everyone in the country and not just those, everyone in the cities too, and
Yeah.
Probably a big industry in that.
Yeah. Honestly.
to get started.
Yeah.
How do you think, is it realistic for a lot of those big farms to move towards more regenerative practices, or do you think in some ways it's already too late?
I think it's never too late.
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody can do their part. It's maybe, I wouldn't say it's out of our hands because these companies are so large, but also, where you buy your food matters. Every decision you make, every choice you make with, what you're drinking, what you're eating, and where you get it from matters.
Yeah.
So maybe not supporting the big guys anymore and supporting local farms. I mean, it's hard because you have to go to the farmer's market every Sunday or whatever. But even, I don't know, if the large farms started to diversify, right? If they started diversifying their crops, I think we'd see a difference because, I mean, you look at the rainforest or the coral reefs, right? The two of the most diverse ecosystems on the face of the planet. They are the strongest and they are the most energetic and they have the most life in them and they're so strong because diversity, all these things are relying on one another to live and to grow. And if we did that with our farms and even with our government, if we just became more diverse, right, we would be so strong because we'd have so many different people, different things, different backgrounds, and different ideas of ways to do things. And I feel like we would just be a stronger society if we just diversified instead of had one singular thing.
Things have definitely become too black and white, I
Yeah.
think, in the society. You know, everything is gray on some level, but people just look at this from such an either or position that I think that's a huge problem. That's like the core of the problem, really. I think too with the farming industry. I mean, that when you follow the money, right? When you're why is this happening? It always comes back to the money and where is that coming from? And they're already, I know for farmers, it's already a crazy small profit margin for the most part, right? And then all those big guys, they have a supplier, of course, right? Or multiple suppliers to get their products into the grocery store. So then you're selling wholesale. I know with you guys, it's probably a little bit less of a razor thin line because you are selling direct to consumer, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of where we need to go with it. You know, have you seen those concepts for the grocery stores where it's like it's a grocery store, but you literally pick your own tomatoes like right
on
off
the top of the store.
Yeah,
I've
exactly.
seen those,
How cool would that be?
Right.
But you have to imagine the amount of money that it would take to get that started, and then it's probably the profit margins are probably still razor thin.
Right.
You know?
That's kind of why we started with microgreens.
Yeah.
Follow the money.
Yeah.
The microgreens showed us.
You're like, I know how to follow the money.
Honestly, well, I mean, you got to make money to become sustainable. You know, you got to be financially sustainable. And that's what the microgreens do for us. And the microgreens are such a cash crop. It's our first niche crop. You know, every farmer has their 5 or 1 niche crop, you know.
Ideally 5.
Yeah,
but typically
ideally
1.
it should be 5. And microgreens are just the number 1 for us because it's so reliable. You know, it's something that you can plant and you know you're going to harvest in 10 to 14 days.
That fast?
It's
really?
really fast.
Wow.
Yeah. It's absolutely amazing. And they're so consistent. You know, that's the one thing that customers love is just the consistency and the promise of the product every week.
Yeah.
You know?
Are they hardy too? I mean, I'm assuming, you know, they grow that fast on some level they must be, but do you ever have issues with like disease among them or anything? Yeah.
Yes, there are some issues. So we run into a thing called dampening off. Dampening off is a fungus that will just take over a flat. And how we mitigate this is using hydrogen peroxide.
Okay.
It's just an organic sterilizer, right? You should use it in your mouth when you're brushing your teeth and everything. I mean, hydrogen peroxide is a wonderful thing to use.
Diluted or straight?
Oh, no. Well, it depends on the percentage.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Right? Oh my God, it will actually turn your hands white if you're using like a 50%.
Yeah, I've always heard like dilute it before you put it on your hands or anything because it just kills your skin on some level too.
Yeah. Depending on the concentration, you know, it's like, it's crazy. But we'll take this and we'll spray it on our microgreens before we stack them because you seed them, you stack the trays, and then you let them germinate. But that hydrogen peroxide kind of just sterilizes everything in the beginning so that the plant doesn't have any issues with mold, spores, or anything like that. And it just really helps keep the consistency of the plant growth. So it's not like some micros over here are growing 4 inches and then the other ones over here are growing 1 inch, you know. It just keeps everything kind of equal. That's what we like, equality, right? Yeah. So it's a nice start to their growth.
That.
Yeah. And if the fungus does come back, like throughout the growing stages, you just take it and periodically spray throughout the tray wherever the issue is, and it tends to go away.
I was reading an article and it was talking about how microgreens might be, you know, a solution for nutrition, instead of, you know, a large scale, you know, solution for nutrition instead of like all the, you know, processed multivitamin sort of things, especially for feeding large, populations appropriately. And I thought that was an interesting concept, right? I think it would be hard to push that through, right? Because all these companies are like, no, why would we do this when we can just make a gummy that tastes like cherries and gives you all your vitamins? I guess my questions would be, do they last a long time? And have you ever, do you know anything about like, can you dehydrate them? And do they, retain their their potency, I guess.
Right. Microgreens, exactly like you said, it's a living multivitamin. It's something crazy. And a lot of people don't realize how many minerals and nutrients are in these little guys. And they're really easy to grow. And yes, you can dehydrate them. And I'm not sure if they keep 100% of their nutrients, but I know the majority of the nutrients do stay in the microgreen. You can even crush it up and use it as a powder or something if you want to mix it into a smoothie.
Okay.
Yeah. You can freeze them and use them for smoothies too. Their shelf life, we always promise 10 days. So you can receive your order and let it sit in your fridge for 10 days before you start seeing it get wilty and kind of dehydrated and limpy, not as crispy as it used to be, you know? So it's cool because they do last much longer than, you know, most produce does from the grocery store. You know, if you're buying a box of lettuce from the grocery store, you probably have like a week to eat that before it gets gross on the
If
bottom.
you're lucky.
Yeah,
basically.
right.
Yeah.
You got to eat it fast. But microgreens, a lot of them, they just last so long because we're growing them to order. So the day that they're harvested is the day that they're delivered. You know, they're not sitting in a fridge waiting to be delivered for, you know, a couple weeks like a lot of our produce is at the grocery store.
Yeah. Well, and that's another issue, right? On this whole, how do we break down the scale and how do we actually, you know, solve this, right? Is if all of our food's being grown in the Midwest, it's only so fast that you can get it into the grocery stores,
Right.
you know? So I feel like having more small farms is the solution to that.
Right.
I mean, I know we can get Amazon one-day shipping from anywhere, but it's just not the same.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure they have to do something to the food too for it to be okay in a warehouse, you know, long term, that sort of thing too.
Yeah, a lot of apples and root vegetables, they will actually suck all the oxygen out of these gigantic coolers that they're keeping them in and gas them with nitrogen so that they're only taking in as much nitrogen as they need to survive, and they can last for a year or so in a refrigerator. So the apple that you're buying at the grocery store right now is probably reaching its first birth date.
That's horrifying.
Isn't that
I
great?
have noticed that about apples before too. I'm like, these really last a long
Yeah,
time
long,
in the
long
fridge.
time.
I'm like, I don't know when I bought this, but it looks fine.
Right. I mean,
Interesting.
it's brilliant and it's wonderful because it has saved us a lot in food waste.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a bad thing for some things, but I'd
Yeah.
say for, you know, potatoes and other things where they actually gas them when they're being delivered, they gas the truck to ripen things on the way to the grocery store, which is so strange to me. But it does rub you the wrong way that the apple that you're eating or the cabbage that you're eating is a year old once you get it into your kitchen.
Oh, you expect that out of your canned foods,
Right,
right? Not
maybe
your
canned.
not your produce. Yeah, canned is one thing, and you just don't think about it too. You know,
Right.
ever make like a can of soup, and you're like, I don't know how old this is. I'm just not going to think about it. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
I'm like, I know there's a science behind this, and it makes sense,
Yeah.
and it's fine.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Some crops. I wouldn't say everything.
Yeah,
You know,
well, I'm sure it
but-
doesn't work for everything, but then they have, you know, the preservatives, right? So I guess
Yeah.
I'd rather they've, you know, whatever done this to my apple,
Yeah.
with the
Refrigerated.
gas versus all the chemicals that they're going to put on it. Which I know you meant
they'll dunk cucumbers in wax and ship them
like a
off.
wine bottle.
Yeah. It's weird. It's so weird.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's an edible wax.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, no. So well, that's the thing is right. There's solutions for all these things that we're also using preservatives for, and I
Exactly.
understand that preservatives are, you know, likely more cost effective and they can do it at a larger scale. But it's not as if there's no other option here,
Right.
and that's I think that's what gets me. And I, you know, with the food industry and with how everyone's sort of realizing how actually much of an issue this really is. We still, I think a lot of people still treat it like, well, what are you going to do? Right? They have to preserve the food. You know, it has to have some solution, but there's other options. You know, and again, it all comes back to follow the money. I think what's the cheapest way for them to do this?
Right. Yeah. It is crazy,
Yeah.
but microgreens, I mean, we can go back to that because it has been the funding crop of the farm. You know, it definitely has brought in a good amount of money that we just keep reinvesting into our company, and it's been able to get us a trailer to hold all of our tools in it for the farm. We've been able to buy, you know, a lot of the awesome tools that we use, like the tilther, one of our seeders. There's so many different tools that we just have loved because it's made our lives so much easier,
Yeah.
especially with weeding and drip tape, irrigation, all that stuff. It's the microgreens have funded all of this. And
What do you sell them for? Like, is it like a certain size bundle that's like your typical,
yeah,
how does that kind of work?
so the microgreens, we sell them by ounce.
Okay.
So restaurants will usually buy about a 4-ounce container, which is about, I mean, you can hold it in both of your hands. It's like a book almost. But
That's a good reference. I like
right.
it.
It's
Yeah.
like it's about it's a small amount of microgreens, but they're only using a pinch per plate. They're just garnishing their food with it. It's taking their plate that they just spent so long cooking, and it's turning it into like a 5-star Michelin in like plate because they just put a little green stuff on top. But it really makes a difference.
No, it absolutely. I mean, they, every time you go to like a nice restaurant, they're plating whatever your dessert, right? And it has like 5 little drops of chocolate, and you're
Yeah.
like, this is stupid, but also it
pretty.
feels fancy now.
Yeah.
I'd imagine though with the microgreens thing on, topping dishes with that, how often are people just brushing that right off, right?
Yeah.
They don't, oh, it's a garnish.
Yeah,
it's
they don't
it's
even
a
eat it.
superfood. You don't even understand. I feel like it should come with a pamphlet. Like,
Right.
eat that.
Honestly,
It's like the best part of your meal. Just
honestly,
eat it.
it's so silly. But yeah, most people just brush it off. They don't even eat their microgreens.
Wow.
And
I'm going to keep that in mind next time I have them. I'll be like, I'll send you a picture. Be like, are these microgreens or is this a garnish?
Right? Honestly, I work at the restaurant where we sell our microgreens, and
One of
I'll
several
just-
restaurants, right?
Yeah,
That
one
take
of
them? Yeah.
multiple, and it's like, holy crap! You're just taking the plate back to the bus pit, right? And it's like, oh my god, all these microgreens are still on the
You
plate.
like put
and
them in your pockets. You're like, I can resell these. No.
That's stupid. But I would like to start composting our food waste from the restaurants. I would like to start a trading, like I'll give you a bucket if you fill it up for me every week. And I'll
Yeah.
bring it back to the farm. So every delivery I make, I'll pick up their bucket, bring compost back to the farm and start composting it there.
How do you incentivize the restaurants to do that? Is it like
So-
a discount on their?
It's really no discount. It's saving them money. So you look at a lot of dumpster fees. A lot of dumping companies will actually charge you per pound, or they go by weight, and the trucks will weigh their dumpster as they're putting it in the truck. So I always tell them that the main weight in your dumpster is mainly water, and water comes from food. The heaviness of the food is the issue. That's the majority of your weight that you're getting in your garbage. So if you can reduce that by giving it to me, you can probably save a lot of money, or some money, in your dump fees. So it incentivizes them to save money, but also they know what I'm doing with that, and it kind of makes them feel warm and fuzzy inside, like they're
Yeah.
recycling in a way, because we don't recycle here in America anymore. There's no recycling other than cardboard, and it's sad, but you can recycle food waste. But certain things like no animal products, I have to really give them a guidebook and show them how to properly, manage the waste. But as long as they do it properly and put just vegetable scraps in the buckets, I will be glad to take it back and compost it.
Is it if you have to get compost from other sources, like if you have to order it, high quality compost from somewhere, is that expensive or
Very.
very?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, especially for the good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of compost companies, or just landscaping companies that make compost, they'll just take a bunch of people's yard waste, right?
Oh.
Or they'll take
Like grass clippings
yeah, grass
and that sort of
clippings.
thing.
But the
Okay.
problem is that most people's grasses are treated, right? So you're getting
Back to the glyphosate.
exactly. It's sad, but it's like you gotta look out for where you're getting your compost from. Same thing with manure. If the cows are eating things or getting pumped with antibiotics or something like that, there's so many things that could hurt your soil. So you have to be careful with what you put into your soil. That's why I want to do the composting.
Yeah.
But
When it comes to that aspect of it, of like you said, if the cows are, eating things they shouldn't have, and then that's going into the manure, is that more so just damaging to the soil, or do you know, does it show up in the food as well?
it doesn't show up in the food. Plants have a good resilience of not taking in toxins,
Yep.
which is really intelligent of them. But the cows will actually, they'll be pumped with antibiotics or growth hormones and whatnot, and then that will actually come out in their poop and kill a lot of microbiology in your soil as well, because it's an antibiotic. It kills things. It's just like hydrogen peroxide. It kills things. So if it took hydrogen peroxide or vinegar and sprayed it on the soil, you'd kill everything in the soil. So mixing those cows' manure into your soil wouldn't be too beneficial. And also what they're eating could be an issue. If they're eating, a bunch of grass with weed seeds in it, you could get a big old headache of weeds in your field. That's why I like compost, because compost, it's a crazy phenomenon. Compost, it actually, it's amazing, and it's what nature does. You're taking a pile of food waste, and you have to have a good ratio of 30% nitrogen and 70% carbon. And as long as you're keeping that ratio the same and mixing it monthly, I'd say, or weekly, you will reach a temperature of 140 degrees in the center of your compost pile. And that temperature is a sterilization temperature. So it kills weed seeds, it kills bad bacteria, and it kills pathogens, a lot of horrible things that you don't want entering your soil. So this composting it's mainly just microbes eating everything down, breaking it up, and pooping. And they create heat, right? And that's what sterilizes it. So you're getting this, we call it black gold, but it's
Nice.
Organic matter, right?
Yeah.
And it's food for the soil. So all the worms and all the bugs and microbes will eat that organic matter in the soil and then become a bigger population because there's more of them because they can have more food.
Okay. And versus that's compost, and then if it's manure, is it more just like?
Manure's great because it is organic matter. There are some good things with manure. I have never used manure, so I can't really talk too much about it. But I've heard a lot of stories of farmers getting bad batches of manure that's either not aged long enough and it has too much nitrogen and it will burn your crop, or the weed seed aspect, or even the antibiotic poop, which is not good. So I just have never used cow manure, and I don't know if I ever will. I might if it's aged long enough. Like if it's been sitting in a pile for like 2 or 3 years, maybe I'd feel okay with using it. But it's a little risky for me personally. I don't know.
Yeah. Interesting. Do you know the big farms? Do you know what they tend to use? I know it's probably a lot of like spray on sort of fertilizer.
Yeah, there's this method that you'll see corn farmers and other large crop farmers, they'll take a big dump truck of manure. And this is raw sludge, right? They're just taking fresh poop and slingshotting it across their field. And it's like a sprayer, and it just sprays like this. And it's the most disgusting smell. It smells up the whole farm. And you'll drive through farms and smell that. It's disgusting.
Yeah, I live in a farm town, and on a nice breezy, warm day, you're like, oh, I forgot.
Must be spreading the.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's just, they'll do that for certain crops like corn because it grows so tall. But the issue with me, I grow lettuce and I grow a bunch of things that are close to the ground or even in the soil, like radishes. If I use raw poop in the soil, there could be a potential pathogen, E. coli, anything bad that splashes up onto the leaves. And then I take it back, wash it, pack it, and send it to the restaurant, and somebody gets sick. So I never use raw manure or any type of manure in my soils just because of how close I am to the ground with my crops.
Is your insurance, like your business insurance, reasonable for, that, or do they kind of get you with having that sort of liability?
Yeah, so we have flip insurance, and it's farm liability insurance. I forget the acronym, but it's
a farm-specific product. Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice, but it's I think it's about $20 a month. But yeah, it's amazing.
Wow.
It's a great program. But they're doing it to support small farms because they want to promote farming in New Hampshire.
Is that a federal, a state program, or
I believe it's state.
Okay.
I think so. I'm not 100% sure, but
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's really great. But it protects you in many different ways. When we were going to farmers markets, and if our tent, took a big gust of wind and fell on top of somebody, right, we would be covered for their injuries. So it was really useful just to kind of take that weight off of our shoulders.
Yeah, that's hard because, we live in such a litigious society, and it's just it's continuing to go that way. You sue people for anything these
Yeah.
days, and that it's all right if your food poisons someone in the restaurant, fair,
Yeah.
right? But the wind knocks your thing over,
Yeah.
come on, like I've had the same issue because I own Airbnbs, right? So, and we've actually had to. That's been, the insurance industry has gone absolutely crazy lately. But we've had to get separate policies. I had to get an umbrella insurance policy because the one that I had, if we offered bikes at the property for the guests to use, my regular just Airbnb insurance policy doesn't cover that if they decide to drive the bike into traffic, So I had to get a separate policy for that. But I've just,
Wow.
at some point, you have to be responsible for yourself,
Yeah.
and it's hard, of course, to figure out where that line is, I think, but I love that they have that program
Right.
for you.
It's
I mean,
very
go
broad.
New Hampshire.
Right.
Woo.
Honestly, New Hampshire's great. I mean, there's,
Live free or die.
Yeah. I love live free or die. It's crazy. This state is wonderful. It used to be cow Hampshire.
Yeah.
We used to grow a bunch of cows here, and then
Grow a bunch of
yeah, I mean, it was and sheep too.
Yep.
It was great, and there used to be no trees here. Really, this was
Really?
all farmland. Yeah, just pastures.
Mostly like southern New Hampshire, I'd imagine. Like once you get up into more of the mountains.
Yeah.
Was it like that
I
too?
feel like it was a lot of New Hampshire. The majority of New Hampshire was not forested.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's why you see all the stone walls throughout the woods.
Yeah.
Because those are all old farm land lines, and it was an old pasture grazing ground for all these farmers. But we've reforested it, and it's amazing soil to farm with because of all that, poop.
It all comes back to poop. Well, I guess you and I hadn't necessarily thought of that though, but New Hampshire, it doesn't have a lot of big trees.
No.
I mean, obviously there's some out there, of course, but yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's something else, but it's great for us farmers because there's a really important nutrient. It's NPK, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And phosphorus comes from animal urine and animal poop. And if you have a lot of that in your soil, you never have to add it to the soil, which is great. So a lot of New Hampshire farmers don't need much phosphorus.
So I wonder too, do you know the history of when did they sort of make that switch to planting trees? Because New Hampshire for a while, I believe, was, had the most trees out of any state in the country, at least relative to its size. I think Maine or Vermont beats us now, technically, but we were up there for a while. So at some point there had to have been
A switch.
a switch of like,
Yeah.
no more cows, we want trees,
Well, that's when the large farmers came in and started growing all of the
Gotcha.
animals in one central location.
Yep.
And it's on the Mississippi River. There's all these cow farms and dairy farms that are just growing mass animal productions, and
So it's probably like pre-industrial revolution, like probably around that sort of time where it was
the green revolution.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely.
Interesting. Where a lot of up here that's the mill buildings went in, and it was much more industrial up here, and then it all that sort of shifted to the Midwest.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So pre-mills.
Yeah, pre-mills.
Yeah.
That's when the mills got rid of the cows. Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Do you remember ever growing up? Because we both went to school in Manchester, New Hampshire, and there's a lot of mill buildings there. And I'm thinking probably in middle school, probably went on one of those field trips together where you're going and exploring the mills.
Yeah.
I always thought it was simultaneously so cool, but also struggle to understand why. At that point, I'm like, why are these buildings so important?
Yeah.
But I do like that about the city that they've, they switched to this whole industry, but it's still there, and they've converted them to, into other things. It is cool. Like there's that historical aspect of New Hampshire that's even, people think that of small towns in New Hampshire, and there's a lot of history, right? But we've even kept it in some of our quote unquote cities. I don't know if you'd really call Manchester a city.
Yeah. I mean, I work at Fratello's, which is in the mill building.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah. And so it's awesome just to see the beams and all the old machinery that they kept in the restaurant to kind of show people this used to be a shoe factory.
Yeah.
Is
that what it was?
It was.
At Fratello's?
Yeah. And,
interesting.
Yeah. My boyfriend's grandmother actually used to work in that mill building, and every time we take her there, she tells us 15 times that she used to work in that building. And she tells everybody there that she used to work in that building, and she's just the cutest thing. But she can tell you so many stories from that place.
Did she like working in the mills there?
I think she did. I can't tell if, she has pride that she took, the job in that building, but I think the working conditions were a little scary back then.
Yeah. Well, that's what I kind of remember from all the field trips. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, here's the tiny windows. And once you were 12, you could work here.
Yeah. Just keep your hair up. Don't
Yeah,
let your
keep
hair
your hair
go
up.
into the machine.
Yep. Bring in the children with the little fingers. That was the other one. Jesus. Which is, simultaneously too, back to when we were saying, bringing food back in smaller scale, right? But that's also bringing back made in America.
Yeah.
Right. I think we need to go back to more manufacturing in America and more, in smaller settings, right? And making products that are meant to last and not meant to, it's super cheap. You just buy a million of them because you throw it right out.
It's designed to break.
Yeah. I exactly. I think that's something we need to go back to just without the child labor and and that should be doable.
Yeah. Well, it's mainly, little businesses working together. It's diversity in the ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
The community. It needs more teamwork. We're providing for restaurants that surround us, and they want to support us. So they buy our product. We want to support them. So we always buy a coffee or a muffin or whatever when we go in and bring their delivery. And then we promote them on social media. We also say, this product's going to be here this week. Make sure you go in and try. It's all of us working together that really makes that strong community. And that's kind of how we need to use it as an example, just to kind of give our future generations the vision of teamwork and just working together to be happier and more resilient.
Yeah. No, and I love the idea of, it's hard to implement, but going on some level back to a barter system.
Right.
And it's, of course, in today's society, you can't do that for everything, but I love that idea. And then even, you don't have to have a product to sell, right? It can be if you're handy or if you're, we can expand on this. Maybe, you're a lawyer, right? I'll give you legal counsel for microgreens. It can come back on some level.
Yep.
And I'm sure that's, more prevalent in small towns, but how do we bring that back on a larger scale, I think is an important question. Obviously, it's not just you running the farm. So tell me about your team.
My mother is amazing. She's definitely doing all the background stuff. So she's ordering seeds. She's, typing up invoices. She's doing all this stuff, organizing trays, measuring out seed weights, and all this stuff that is nitty gritty that really I don't want to do. And she really helps me out a lot with that. She's really taken the lead with, the website and just the social media, and just always there to leave or give us a helping hand. She's awesome. She comes to the farm a lot too, and she'll try and do manual labor, and she does a really good job. But the heat gets to her.
Yeah,
so
fair enough.
Year,
I don't do well in the heat
it's
either.
tough.
I get that.
It really is.
Yeah.
New Hampshire's getting hot.
That's the division of labor, right? That's exactly, you don't want to do the website or whatever, and that's her specialty. That's how you have this cohesive unit that works so well together.
Exactly.
Have you do you think down the line, expanding to hiring people, is that sort of on the radar?
Yeah. I think my mom really loves working with the flowers, so I'm going to leave her to that.
Yep.
And I would love to get somebody who I could pay just part-time to come in and seed microgreens or even just harvest microgreens and get the orders ready. I like to do the deliveries because the deliveries, you're talking to your customers, you're building that relationship. They want a face to the business, so it's nice to kind of have that. But I would like a farm hand just to help me do labor around the farm and pick up rocks and move compost and
basic farmhand stuff.
Just rip weeds
You're the rock
up.
guy.
Yeah, get on the ground. Honestly, there's so many things. I mean, you're doing a full workout when you're a farmer. It's wonderful, and you're grounding too. Grounding is so important, and none of us really know what it is, but it's really beneficial, and it just connects you to the ground.
You mean grounding like where it has to do with like your neutrons or whatever,
Yeah.
how they I have a very vague understanding of that.
Yeah,
but yes,
so
I
you're
think that
grounding.
is so important, and there's a lot of research that backs that up too, and then I feel like I've learned about it in the past and then be like, okay, I want to be more mindful, I'm going to, after I go walk on the beach barefoot or something, and be like,
Right.
do you feel a difference? And I think you absolutely do. That's interesting. I know there's a thing with grounding where there's a way you can like connect your bed.
That's what I have.
You have that?
Yeah.
Okay, tell me about that because it's very interesting.
It's
It also
strange.
seems scary, like you're going to get electrocuted. But
Well,
obviously
kind
you
of,
haven't.
but no. It's awesome. It's like it's this mattress cover, and it's threaded with copper coil, so you don't feel it. It feels like fabric, but it's all meshed coil copper, and you put it over your bed and you sleep on it, obviously. But you take it, you plug it in, and then you'll take the cord and you just plug it into the outlet in your room, because every house has a ground, right? Just like our bodies should be grounded, our houses are grounded. Because if we have an electrical storm, the extra energy would blow up our electrical devices if they weren't grounded. So what the ground does is absorbs extra energy that the machines don't need, right? So that little hole, so you have the two prongs that bring in electricity, right, on the outlet, and then you have that bottom, I call it the mouth. It's the bottom hole. That is the ground.
Okay.
And so you plug in your mattress thing to that ground, and it just absorbs the extra energy that's coming from your body, and it brings it into the ground of that outlet, and it goes right into the ground of the house, outside of the house.
How long have you had that on your bed?
I've had that on my bed for about 2 years now.
Okay. Did you
And-
notice it have a noticeable difference after you started using it? I wouldn't expect it to be like a
No.
huge, right? But
Yeah, I don't really expect a difference because I'm already grounded.
Yeah,
Every day
very true.
I'm already outside touching the ground, and I mean, all of our devices, microwaves, radios, cars, all this stuff gives us free radicals, right?
Yep.
Our phones, all of it.
Yep.
And the free radicals are not good for our bodies. And the only way to get rid of them is to ground. And we wear rubber shoes, right? And we drive cars with rubber tires. We walk in insulated buildings, and we don't ever touch the ground anymore. And so a lot of our inflammation and headaches and high blood pressure is coming from this overacted system that's stressed out because it has too many radicals. It's reacting with too many machines in our daily lives.
yeah.
So I'm already grounded. I do that, so I didn't
You're
notice
like,
a
"I'm good, I'm
difference.
good."
But
Yeah.
maybe somebody might notice a difference if they try it on their bed,
Yeah.
and they don't tend to go outside too much.
I will be the guinea pig. I will do that. Like
It was
I,
$50.
Yeah.
it was like a
Very
no-brainer.
reasonable. Yep.
Yeah.
That's like a good price point too, where I'm like, okay, I feel like this was expensive enough that it won't electrocute me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If something's too cheap, you're always like,
You're
I
worried.
don't. Yeah. Like I'm not gonna buy a $6 lamp or something. You know? I'm like, it's gonna get me. That's interesting though. So I'm currently reading a book, Good Energy by Casey Means. I think we talked about her a little bit yesterday. They're Casey and Callie Means. They're so interesting. But she talks a lot about free radicals and inflammation and how there's studies and her belief, right, is inflammation is really the core of pretty much every chronic health issue that we're facing, right? And that all comes back to the way your cells and your mitochondria, how are they managing, right? Are they overburdened? And how are they compensating for that, right? And I feel like for so long this has almost been kind of a woo-woo concept,
You'd
even
think, right?
yeah, well, even grounding. I'm someone who I find all this so interesting. I'm trying to educate myself more on it, but I'm still like, I don't have that on my bed, right? Because my initial thought is like, I'm going to get electrocuted. You know what I mean? So but I love that it's becoming more mainstream to say, really what it is. But I think that's so important because it does matter, right? And whether even if just going outside and walking around, like you can't tell me that that's not good for you. You know, what argument do you have that that's not good for you on some level, no matter what level that is?
Right. It is. It's crazy. Inflammation, like you were saying, is a big driver of a lot of chronic issues. And, you look at sugar, and sugar is in all of our foods, and that's mainly, it causes inflammation. Same with a lot of animal products. Most animal products cause inflammation. And, there's a lot of things you can do to help mitigate your inflammation, like eating plants and berries that have purple pigment in them. It's anthocyanin. Anthocyanin's like in beets, it's in berries, it's an antioxidant, and it also reduces inflammation significantly if you're eating it regularly.
Yeah.
But even functional mushrooms. Mushrooms are like, oh my God, I can't
I'm
believe
on
we
that
haven't
now.
even talked
No,
about mushrooms.
and I'm on that now too. So I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mushrooms
Yep.
are huge.
Yep.
They're called functional. There's psychedelic and then there's functional, right?
And there's a big difference too. And that's when you tell them like, oh, I take mushrooms every single day. And people
Yeah.
they're still like,
Right.
oh,
They're like, "Are you
do
tripping?"
you? Yeah. I'm like, I don't think I want to work with you. I'm like, no,
No,
you're
just-
my coffee.
Right. It's a coffee mushrooms. Yeah. I take them as a gummy. I take lion's mane gummies.
Okay.
And
We have the capsules, and then I have a coffee
Nice.
one too. It's
Yeah.
lion's mane,
cordyceps.
cordyceps. Yep. And then shaga is huge. I don't know if you've talked to my dad.
Yeah,
about
he loves
Yeah, he
shaga.
loves shaga.
I
And
got
he
him
has-
a big brick of it. It's crazy.
He loves it. Well,
Yeah.
he had a tendon in his hand, because he's almost 70 now. He had a tendon in his hand that was like calcified, like, arthritic kind of, right? And it was just couldn't even like move his hand. And he attributes shaga to that completely going away. Like he was on a regimen drinking, shaga tea twice a day, didn't do anything else. It had this issue with his tendon for years and it went away fairly quickly after that. Shaga is incredible. It has, their studies show that it prevents cancer, it fights tumors, a million different things.
So many things. Mushrooms are magic.
Yeah.
They don't just call them magic mushrooms
Yeah.
for nothing, but they are. They're beautiful beings, and they're not an animal or a plant, right? They're their own species, kind of like coral. Coral is a plant and an animal.
Yeah.
It's got polyps, but it
True.
also photosynthesizes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a plant and an animal. But fungus is its own. And it's the largest branch of the tree of life. It has the most diversity out of any being on the face of the planet. And I think that they're aliens, but they're pretty cool.
Yeah.
They help us in so many ways. They're like little saving graces. There's so many people that have been cured of chronic diseases because they've taken turkey tail, right?
Yeah.
Or they've taken chaga or anything really. Lion's mane helps Alzheimer's and it promotes neurogenesis. It's the rebirth or new birth of new brain cells and neurons in your brain. It's crazy. The mushroom forest is underground, right? Their roots are called mycelium, and mycelium connects all the living beings in the forest. And they found back in 2020 that there's actually keen recognition in trees, right? So mother trees can actually take care of their babies through mycelium,
Yeah.
right? So if their baby's getting attacked by ants or a fungus, a bad fungus or something, they can actually send sugars and starches through their roots and through the mycelium to their babies and help that baby get stronger by giving it food.
Yeah.
Right. And that's keen recognition. That's a mother taking care of its younger baby.
Yeah.
It's like that's found in a lot of animals, and we didn't expect to see it in plants, but plants have hearts too.
Yeah.
They're intelligent.
I love laying it out that way. Like that's such a nice, wholesome, and very interesting take on that versus, have you ever heard the one where it's grass when it's freshly mowed smells that way because it's all the grass telling the rest of the grass it's
to grow stronger.
Yeah, well, I think it's like, hey, we're being cut right now. Like that's what they say. It's like they're releasing like a pheromone or whatever, being like, yeah, we're being chopped up right now. Be warned.
Yeah, that's
And
like the
that's
trees.
like kind of a dark take on it. Yeah.
Honestly, they cut trees in the forest, and the ones surrounding that cut tree will actually grow straighter, straight up, because it's their way of showing that I'm strong and you can't cut me down.
Yeah.
They grow much straighter than before when there was not a tree cut down. But it's crazy how intelligent plants are. We just lack we speak in English, right? We don't speak bird or whale like Dory. But everything has its own language, and the natural world is talking to itself and communicating to itself. We just lack the ability to understand what it's saying. But it is living and intelligent, and it is here to help, and it's here to take care of us. We just are destroying
I think it's trying to talk to us.
It is.
too, right? And it's, even if you're really in tune with that, it can still be hard to hear it, right? Going back to mycelium, so I have a question for you on that, because I've heard, in the like functional mushroom industry, that mycelium is often, because it's just the root, right? And it's like powdered, and they also often use it as almost like a filler, like cut into, but it's not good for you.
No,
right?
it's not the same.
Yeah.
You need the fruiting body or the actual structure.
Yeah.
Like you need even the spores I'm iffy about. I don't think the spores are the same as well. You need the actual fruiting body.
And it needs to be extracted in a certain way,
Actually,
right?
all mushrooms are toxic to us until we cook them. So we can't
all
of them. We can't eat them in a healthy way
Yeah.
unless we cook them. You know why they took button mushrooms out of salads? Like you used to see mushroom, like that white
Well, some of them are a carcinogen, right?
Yeah.
Like portobellos, I believe, are
Yeah.
even if they're cooked, they're kind of a carcinogen, I think.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of
No,
mushrooms
I don't think
that
it's
are,
like a super potent one, but I
Yeah.
know there's some that have been linked to it for sure.
it's always the dose. You know,
Yeah.
it's always how much you're taking.
Yeah.
And
Well, they're so different too, right? Like it's
Yeah.
it's like with berries. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can eat a blueberry, but don't eat,
Yeah.
all these other kinds of berries that'll, poison you. It's very different.
Yeah. But cooking them, that's the most important. Like
Yeah.
lion's mane, you won't get the nutrients out of it unless you cook it.
Is that something, can you grow? Could you farm that? Or is it, I mean, obviously people do, right? It's not just being foraged, but how does that, do you know much about that?
So I am actually growing mushrooms right now.
There we go. Perfect.
Yeah, it's crazy. So we actually worked with North Spore, right? We just bought a couple inoculation kits from North Spore, and we drilled holes into these hardwood logs.
Yep,
So
I've
you
seen
use
that.
hardwood,
Yep.
really. You can't use pine or anything acidic because softwood is not good for mushrooms. You want to use hardwood like oak or birch
Cedar or something?
cedar. Yeah, I think cedar is acidic. Maybe I can't. It's like a pine, but
yeah, true.
but yeah, you can use a bunch of different hardwoods. Just look them up because I don't know them off the top of my head. But we use oak, and oak is great. And we just drilled a bunch of holes, and we got these pegs. They're just a peg that's inoculated with mycelium, and you just hammer them gently into the log, and then we covered it with beeswax. So over the course of 2 years, it should grow a couple of lion's manes, and we did reishi, and we had turkey tail and oyster. We had so many different varieties that we did, but we built it like a Lincoln log structure, and just hoping that it kind of is an investment, right? We put time into it, and then maybe we'll get some mushrooms in a couple years.
Where do you get your supplements from now?
Right now, I take mud water.
Mud water.
Yeah,
That
I
is
love
a
mud water.
Sweet name.
I know, right? It's dirt. It's dirty, but it is so good. And I always tell people, don't use water with it. Use like a oat milk or some sort of cream. And I always love to mix maple syrup in it.
Okay, so is that like another one of like the coffee-esque
It is.
ones? Okay, so I've been doing daily dose or everyday dose. I
Yep,
forget which
I've
one
seen
it is.
that.
Yeah. Someone recommended it to me, and then I looked it up, and it looked good. I'm like, I'll try
It's like
it.
hot chocolate.
Yeah, so I do mine with in my coffee, and you can do it like in regular coffee, or you could do it just as itself, and it tastes coffee-esque, right?
Yeah.
It's close enough. It's pretty good. But the big one in that is lion's mane, and I've probably been doing that for 3 months. I've absolutely noticed a cognitive difference, 100%. I mean, it's not like night and day, but I do feel like I'm generally sharper. I have less brain fog, than I usually do. So I've definitely noticed a difference.
Yeah. It took me a while to kind of
It took a while though, for
Yeah.
sure. It wasn't like instant, but it's about 3 months now. So,
Yeah. I mean, I still drink coffee, but I take I take my lion's
he
mane
has a Dunkin'
gummies.
Donuts cup in the room right
I
now.
don't drink Dunkins, I swear. No, it's bad. I shouldn't drink Dunkin'
I
Donuts.
do Dunkin' Donuts
It's
a lot
just
too.
so
Well,
good.
yeah, that's the whole. We know what the problems are, right?
Right.
We know that like in fast food and everything, but I
But it's
still
right there.
do it. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
right there and it's easy and it's
Yeah.
not cheap anymore though. So that's gonna kind of push it. It's ridiculous
Yeah.
how expensive it is actually now.
Yeah.
I'm like, I should have just gone to a restaurant.
Yeah.
Like you can just go to a restaurant, don't order a drink, and you'll be paying
Yeah.
the same amount that you would have
Honestly.
just at McDonald's or whatever.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But
that
I do
yeah.
notice a difference with the lion's mane. Big time.
Yeah.
It's just I don't know, it turns my brain on. They say you're only using about 20% of your brain, and I think mushrooms have that key to unlock a lot of things in our brain.
Yeah.
All different types of mushrooms, actually.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, there's really fascinating research that again is becoming more mainstream about psychedelic mushrooms
Right.
and the crazy effects that they have on people with depression and anxiety and PTSD, right? Like it's a legitimate treatment. And I'd love for that to become more mainstream and more researched too, right? Because I feel like that's still its beginning stages. So there'll be a lot of people that are like, well, who did this research?
Yeah.
Right? Somebody who probably took a lot of mushrooms, So, but it's so promising that you want it to become
Yeah.
more popular.
The thing
you know?
is,
and
it's like one experience changes people's lives
yes.
forever.
And again, that's why there needs to be more research, right? So more people know that that is a viable solution, but also there are some people that don't react to it well, right?
Yeah.
You know, and that's just, I don't know that, you know, they say, is it a genetic factor? Is it a mental factor? What is it, right? Some
Yeah.
people, it is detrimental to them. But with more research, they can probably figure out what that is. You know, is it a genetic thing? Can you then get tested and see, okay, no, you have this genetic marker that's going to mean you're going to freak out
Right.
if you take these, you know,
Yeah.
and it's not going to help you,
It's
right?
like cilantro and dish soap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like cilantro. Or like asparagus. Like some people, when they eat asparagus, their pee
They
smells.
smell, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And other
It's like, what the heck? We're so weird.
it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
But it's important, right? And that's why, like, these conversations are important. And I, you know, and especially I love hearing them from, you know, bigger voices, right? And like people with huge followings and everything talking about it, because it just, we should be curious about everything. You know, none of these things should be so, within reason, outlandish to then go and test and see how other people reacted to it, right? Because it everything, you know, is an opportunity. And I feel like it's so overlooked and it's stigmatized, and that goes for a million different things.
Right. I think it's a threat to a lot of large companies.
Yeah.
You know, like the hemp
definitely.
industry was shut down because of the paper mills and everything.
And hemp was, farmers used to be required to grow, I don't know what, it was like 25% of their yield had to be invested in hemp or something. It was like a huge amount because it was in everything.
So usable.
Yeah.
I mean, versatile. You could
Yeah.
use it for anything, and it produced so many fibers that you could make clothing for the entire country out
Yeah.
of one field. You know.
No, it's crazy.
And
well,
now
then
the pharmaceutical company is not allowing all
Yeah.
these companies to do periodic research because it's going to heal people.
Mm-hmm.
And our government wants to keep us sick. So we
Yep.
stay on these medications that are just keeping us sick.
Well, it's a whole industry built on targeting symptoms and not targeting the root cause of things.
Exactly.
You know, and
Yep.
I think everyone, for the most part at this point, has experienced this in one way or another. You know, some people have obviously had it significantly worse where, you know, they have some terrible chronic illness and they go to tons and tons of doctors, right? Even I've my whole life I've had, you know, stomach issues, right? Like just
Same.
like stomach pain and
Yeah.
bloating and like that sort of thing. And I've been to many doctors, and a lot of them told me, I don't know what to do. Don't
You have
eat
IBS.
cheese or exactly, right? And I'm like, I don't think that's it.
No.
Or I've had some where it's like, all right, we're going to give you, you know, here's a medicine that you take when you have like a flare up and it hurts and it just, you know, it calms your muscles down or whatever. And then one day, one random doctor that I went to, and this, I don't even know how many I'd been
Would
to
they say
before.
take a probiotic?
You read my mind. That's
Yeah.
literally, she's like, have you
That
ever
helped me
taken
too.
a probiotic?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay, well, don't go to the store and buy ones off the shelf. She's
No.
like, get, it's a Florigen was what it was. And I still take it today. It's refrigerated.
Yeah.
Because I've, and since doing that, I've tried ones from the store and they don't work the same when they're
Right.
like not refrigerated.
They die in your gut.
Exactly. It changed my life.
Yeah.
When she told me about that, it was like at a really bad time and I was, you know, really suffering regularly. Within a week, I was like a new person. And I'm like, I don't even know. I know
Right.
what clinic she was from, but I don't know what her name was or anything. And I just want to go back and be like, thank you for just
Telling me.
Have you ever tried a probiotic? Like,
Yeah.
oh my God.
Yeah. I use seed. Seed is amazing because most probiotics die once they get into your gut.
Yeah.
And seed is a probiotic you buy online and it's
SEED.
Yeah, seed. They like the seed, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing. But it's a probiotic inside of a probiotic. So there's 2 capsules in this one that you're taking. And what it does is it releases the first capsule, and inside that outer capsule is fiber. It's the prebiotic. A prebiotic is just food for the probiotics. The second capsule is filled with the probiotic. So it's going into your gut, your stomach acid, right? And it's releasing the prebiotic. And then it reaches your large intestine, and then it releases the inner capsule, which has all of the probiotics that make it to your stomach.
Interesting. I'm definitely going to look that up.
I'll send you the link because
Yeah,
it
definitely.
really helped me, and I still take it. And anytime I have a stomach issue or whatever, I don't take it every day anymore because I don't need to.
Yeah.
But it helped me through a lot of issues with candida, yeast overgrowth, and a bunch of other irritable bowel syndromes.
Yeah,
It was really
just
bad.
all the fun stuff that
All the
so
fun
many
stuff.
people suffer from too.
Oh, yeah.
And that's even, again, that's like the most benign version of this, right? There's people with like debilitating chronic illnesses that have to go to a million doctors, and it's
Crohn's.
yep, and they talk about this in the Good Energy book too, which I highly recommend. But how, our medical system today is so compartmentalized, right? You have, a sinus issue, you go to a sinus doctor, right? You have a gut issue, you go to a gut doctor. And she talks about in it how, one, the source of this is pretty much always inflammation, and it's almost always connected, but we're like, oh no, go here, go here, go here. And it's always really connected too. On the gut thing too, there's so much research that shows that your gut biome is directly, correlates to your mental health. And not just because like, oh, I feel like crap all the time, but like it literally is directly connected. I was just reading too, there was a study where they took a depressed animal and a non-depressed animal, and they did like a fecal transfer from the depressed animal to the non-depressed, and the non-depressed animal became depressed. Like it's crazy. And it's just so overlooked because again, it sounds like, what do you mean? Like my gut bacteria, determines if I'm depressed or not.
It does. It's crazy. They're conscious.
Yeah.
Those beings are conscious in there.
Yeah, very true.
It's back to diversity. If you have a diverse biome in your gut, you're going to be strong.
Full circle.
Yeah. Just like the rainforest and the coral reef and the farm. You got to keep it diverse, and you got to introduce those little guys.
And and these things are relatively easy solutions, right? Like taking a probiotic is an easy solution. Cutting out all processed food is harder,
Very
right?
hard.
But once you start to understand it, it becomes more doable. And that's what I've been trying to do that too. Is just making smarter choices at the grocery store, and then, but it's even more than you don't think of, right? Where it's your laundry detergent. Is there fragrances in that? Is there what's in that? Because think you're wearing that all day, and then even like, say you sleep naked. Well, your sheets were washed in that too. Like you never get away from
you
it.
Can't. It's like escaping plastic. You can't escape it. It surrounds us everywhere.
The cutting board dilemma, though. I don't know what to do about the cutting board dilemma, because you can't use plastic because of the microplastics. Can't use wood because it holds on to bacteria or something like that. And there's some issue with metal ones too. It's like, oh, they rust and then they get rust in your food. So I'm like, where do I cut my food? What do I do?
use a metal. I mean, not a metal. I use a wood chopping block. But I use hydrogen peroxide to clean it.
There you go.
But it gets deep. It bubbles. You can see it bubbling.
That's a good one.
Even bleach. Bleach is an organic cleaner to use on a farm. Like a certified organic farm can use bleach because it is a organic way to get rid of bad things. Yeah.
Well, you can use bleach to purify water. Like you can use it to purify drinking water. It's a very tiny amount. It's like one drop per gallon or something. But yeah, it's, within reason. It's a very... And I feel like bleach is what is in bleach? How is bleach made?
I think it's chlorine.
Just chlorine,
yeah.
Interesting.
It's weird. It's really weird. Hydrogen peroxide almost smells like bleach sometimes, but it's different.
Yeah.
It's oxygen. It's like an extra molecule added to water.
Okay.
Like an extra oxygen added to water, which is strange, but it's an amazing chemical that I use in my mouth. I use it as mouthwash, but it's killing all of the bad things in my mouth. If I ever had an issue, I would just go back to hydrogen peroxide. I put it on my wounds when I cut myself. And,
it's all back to basics, right? We don't need these super complex, new products or whatever, right? You go back to basics, and a lot of them are basics that have been around for a long time for a reason,
Right.
They work well, and they're safe when used correctly. But I feel like there's just such a we have to have the next like fancy thing or the next and
Fabulosa.
It's everything, right? And so often it's just vinegar for vinegar and water for a cleaning solution, and those things aren't good for literally everything, but it's just a way to cut down on so much. I mean, it's horrifying. It really is crazy. All right. I think we're kind of running out of time. I think we've sort of covered everything and then some. We went full circle. We talked about poop.
Your gut.
Yeah, we talked about your gut, magic mushrooms. I don't really know what else you could possibly want out of this. So again, to reiterate, so your business is Good For You Gardens.
Yes.
You're goodforyouGardens.com. for the website?
Yes, that's us.
Okay.
Yep.
And based out of Manchester and Bow, New Hampshire. So anyone listening, you should definitely look Jake and Donna, that's your mom, right?
Yep.
Donna up. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey,
This was really fun.
Thank you for having me. I loved it.
Yeah.
This was great. Great combos.
No, I told you it's fun, right?
Yeah,
it's a good time.
All the topics I love.
Yeah. All right, perfect.